Hello and welcome to the Andrew Ferris Podcast. Thanks so much for joining me for another episode of the show. And today on the show, I want to talk to you about what I'm calling the hidden value of forecasting your business. There are probably actually lots of hidden values to forecasting your business, but I'm going to show you one that's come to the top of my mind recently as I've worked with clients and seen businesses up close, especially as businesses are scaling in earlier stages. I think that forecasting your business is one of the most important exercises an operator does, and not because you're going to be correct in your forecast. Not even to plan your supply chain and your inventory, though those things are important too. But because I think by forecasting your business, you will have greater clarity than ever before to where profit will be generated in your business. I'm going to tell you why and how to do it. Let's jump in. All right, just tales from the trenches here today. Things that I have seen in businesses that I've been working with and that I think are just so important. And here's the core idea. I'm just getting right to it straight away. The core idea is this. When you forecast your business intelligently, you end up designing your business as you do it. And you may not realize that. You may not realize you're doing both at the same time, but you are. If you forecast your business and you forecast it thoughtfully and all the way down through every big element of your business, like I'm not even actually talking about the details here, but sort of the big chunks of your P&L. If you forecast your business with the big chunks of your P&L clearly thought through, you are going to, by definition, design your business as well. And so if you're trying to create profit in your business, then thinking about how to forecast appropriately will give you more clarity than you've ever had before to where in your business you are going to be able to actually generate that profit. Now, let me explain what I mean. You've probably heard me before talk about the concept of four-quarter accounting. That's a term I got from Common Thread Collective, Taylor Holiday, and I now sort of reject it. It's still a helpful overview idea, but the idea of four-quarter accounting is just breaking up, theoretically, I mean, there's a couple ways to look at it, but it's just to break up your P&L into 4 quarters, right? Each being 25%. And those 4 sections are your underneath your revenue, right? So revenue comes first. Those 4 sections of your costs on your P&L are cost of goods sold and really all variable costs associated with selling a product. I would call that cost of delivery. Okay, that's quarter number 1. Quarter number 2 would be CAC, right? So all of your advertising costs. Quarter number 3 would be operating expenses or SG&A, but basically fixed costs, right? So if you just think of COGS as variable cost of delivery, it's variable costs associated with selling a product, and then Opex is fixed costs, and then sort of CAC. CAC is a variable cost, but we'll put it in its own bucket, okay? Those 3 things, that means there's one quarter left, and that's profit. The idea of 4-quarter accounting is that if you can make each of those first 3 cost centers into 25% of your revenue, then that leaves one 25% chunk left. That 25% chunk left is profit. And so it's a really good way to think about how to generate profit in your business. Now, very few e-commerce businesses are running at a 25% bottom line profit. And there's a pretty good argument that if you're running at that profit, if you're anywhere in early stage of growth, I mean, under, I don't know, $200 million, you should probably be trying to find ways to reinvest more into your business somewhere because it's probably too profitable. But that's a problem for very few people. And you get the basic idea, right? There's those 4 quarters. Well, I mean, thinking in those terms is very, very helpful, even if you don't think in terms of 25%. Because the other truth here is that the vast majority of businesses are not actually having a 25% landed cost of delivery. Okay, that's a very high margin business. If you're there, fantastic, good for you. You're going to make your life a lot easier with that. I'm working with one business right now that is somewhere right around there, right? But for them, it's really, really hard to keep their CAC low enough to make that go under 25% because their LTV is not that great. And so it's hard to create organic revenue and on and on and on it goes. And what I'm doing right now, as I start talking about those things, the thing I'm doing there is beginning to break down the design of the business. What I just did with a business I thought about was I thought, okay, cost of delivery is right around that 25% number. That's great. Now, there's not a ton of returning customer revenue in this business. I'm going to come back to that actually in a second. There's some, but there's not a ton. And so that CAC number is going to stay a little bit higher because unless there's some organic new revenue channel that is generating a bunch of organic new customer revenue, organic customer acquisition, without that, the number one source of organic revenue is going to be returning customer revenue. And that revenue also isn't that high in this business, which means if there isn't tons of organic new customer revenue, if there isn't tons of organic returning customer revenue, I'm going to have to pay for a lot of that revenue. Unless I'm running that paid spend at like a 3-to-1 or a 4-to-1 or whatever, it's going to be very, very hard for me to keep that number to 25% or less. Now, that can be okay, by the way. The trade-off for this particular business may be that cost of delivery is very low, CAC's a little higher, and so other businesses might switch that, right? The cost of delivery is going to be a little higher, but they're going to have massive LTV, and therefore they create a bunch of profit by keeping that CAC very low, and so on. And what you see is this trade-off between these different buckets of the P&L, to where the CAC, adding more cost into the cost of delivery side of the P&L, and I'm reducing cost in CAC, well, that means that my profit gets affected by those two, okay? And vice versa, and so on. And what happens when you start forecasting your business, if you do that with any honesty, is that you start realizing those truths about your business. Hey, wait a minute, no matter how I look at this, that CAC is pretty high, right? Maybe that's what you're thinking. Or wait a minute, no matter how I look at this, that cost of delivery is pretty high. Now, that assumes that you're forecasting cost of delivery into your business somewhere. You're forecasting your COGS, and even on a P&L basis, not even on a cash basis. So I'm not so much worried about when the payments are going out to your suppliers in this case. Thinking more about like on a accrual accounting basis, on a P&L basis, what is the percentage of your revenue that's taken up by COGS? And are you thinking about that in your forecast? Do you have a baseline forecast that does that? Because as you start doing that, you'll start to go, wait a minute, next month, I'm forecasted for 35% cost of delivery. Okay, that's all right. No big deal if I can make that up elsewhere. Oh, wait, but I'm forecasted for 40% CAC, or a 2.5 MER, 2.5 MER, be another way of thinking about that. Right now, I've eaten up 75% of my revenue in costs. That leaves 25% left over for Opex. And now I can make a decision. Okay, if those two things are really going to be hard for me to beat, okay, then can I keep my Opex to 24% or lower? If so, I'm, just better than break even. Or maybe if I can keep it to 15%, I've got actually 10% bottom line. My business is okay. And all of those ways, those different buckets of the P&L start affecting each other, start to become clear to you. And crucially, you can start managing them. You can start deciding where those big points are, and start thinking about, okay, how do I make sure that as I approach each of these issues, that those numbers are coming in where I wanted them to. Now, I'm going to step one step back into the forecast and say, one of the things I am assuming here is that you are actually building a cohort-based forecast. That's what I'm assuming, an LTV cohort-based forecast. And I will put in the show notes a link to my favorite tool to do this. I've mentioned it a lot of times in the show. I use it with tons of entrepreneurs. And I will also say I've watched a lot of entrepreneurs get stuck on this because it's a big job. It can feel a little bit like trying to go on a run through the mud where your feet are just getting stuck, or through a marsh, right? Through a bog. Like, it can feel really hard. Some entrepreneurs, I think they get really overwhelmed by this job. But I'm going to tell you and beg you, if you want to make your business better, I am going to beg you to please do this work. Do as good of a job as possible on this work. If you get tripped up, figure out how to get help, work through the problems. Go take Dave Recook's course on how to forecast your business in e-commerce, the CXL course. I'll link out to it as well in the show notes. Do those things. Do the work required to forecast your business in an intelligent way. Because if you do, you will know exactly what is going right and what's going wrong in your business. And that's the true value of forecasting an e-commerce business. It's not about being right. It's about when you are wrong, understanding why you're wrong, where it went wrong, how it went wrong. Now, when you think about that, there's this first area of the forecast that is the most obvious place for things to go wrong. That's your ad spend, right? So you project, let's say, $100,000 spend at a 2-to-1, okay? And so there's $200,000, and if you're thinking about this the right way, you'll think of it most of that revenue as new customer revenue. There's going to be some leakage there, maybe 20 grand of that is returning customer revenue, but mostly that's the main goal of your ad spend in e-commerce, is to drive new customer revenue, drive your growth, those kind of things. So, and I don't care what channel this is on, by the way, whether it's Meta or YouTube, or I don't know, even if it's organic content creation, you're putting it in a different bucket. Maybe you call that CAC, maybe you don't, but you get the idea. If you've got that spend and you're projecting a bunch of revenue based off of it, it's going to be kind of hard to figure out how good of a job you're going to do. And spend and revenue, they're just the error bars on your forecast are pretty wide. Okay, that's really normal. But these other two areas of your forecast are actually a lot easier to maintain control of, and only, in my view, really get out of whack if you're not paying attention to them. And what the forecast does is forces you into a world where you pay attention to them. I honestly don't know why at this point. I honestly don't know why. If you are growing your business and looking to add talent, I don't know why you would not be considering working with incredible e-commerce talent in the Philippines and doing it with my friends at More Staffing. I love More Staffing. They are awesome. I am so glad to have them as a sponsor on this show because I believe in them. If you want to get to know them, go listen to my bonus episode from a couple weeks ago with Lara Guevara, the CEO, who herself is in the Philippines and has been a Filipino remote worker. She knows all about what it's like, why it is a great arrangement for both sides, and tells you all about all the things they do to find you incredible e-commerce talent for your business. And in fact, if you're ready to get past listening to Lara talk and go hire e-commerce talent in the Philippines yourself, which you should be if you are forecasting your Opex, realizing you're going to need help and going like, okay, I know that I'm going to need the help, so where do I go find it? Go find it with More Staffing, who I love. Go to morenow.co. Their whole approach is we don't just want to find you the cheapest person possible. We want to find you incredible e-commerce talent, virtual professionals, not just virtual assistants, who can really help your business grow. And they do a lot. They bend over backwards to make sure it's a great arrangement for both you and them. It is definitely cheaper than hiring in the US still. And so it's just a really, really good arrangement, really good deal. Go check out More Staffing. Tell them I sent you, morenow.co, to go consider adding e-commerce talent from the Philippines to your team. Make your business better and keep it lean and profitable at the same time. It is a win-win. Go check it out, morenow.co. So cost of delivery. Let's say you forecast your cost of delivery to be 30% and it comes in at 35%. Well, that leads this very obvious question, which is like, wait, how come I spent so much more on my cost of delivery than I expected? What happened here? And then you break cost of delivery down and go, okay, my merchant account fees, credit card fees, that kind of thing, that's going to be really hard for it to suddenly go from 3% to 5%. Wait, there was a day actually where that would have changed when buy now, pay later providers first came on the scene. They were charging a much bigger percentage of revenue than your regular credit card fees, your Shopify fees. And so you could have sort of seen a couple points of cost of delivery get eaten away there if people were heavily buying with, those platforms on your website. But mostly what's actually going to happen here is some costs went up for your supplier, or you discounted a bunch more than you thought you would. And so your COGS got estimated low, or you have a really wide SKU set and people bought product A a lot more than product B, and you had expected that to be reversed, or whatever, some bundling change or something, or something went wrong with your fulfillment center, and maybe there was a mistake and you planned something wrong, or again, the way you bundled products ended up creating a bunch more costs, heavier packages and more picks per product, and so suddenly they're charging you more than you realize. Whatever, there's like a million things that can go wrong here, even if you can generally project more stability. Lower SKU count brands are going to have less variability here, most likely, but that's helpful, right? Because then you can know, okay, wait, I projected 25%, 30%, it went 30% to 35% or whatever. Now, by forecasting that, by having a target for that, and then by measuring each month what happened, getting that P&L update from your accountant or whatever on the 15th, the next month, you go look at it. Where did it come in relative to my forecast? You just compare those numbers. Here's my P&L. Here's my forecast. Now I know. And I see this number came in a lot higher than I expected or a lot lower than I expected, whatever. And you start to dig into that and begin to control those things. Again, your ad spend, like I talk about that all the time, that's going to have ways in which it gets better or worse than expected. It's normal. The thing that's more interesting to me is this question of like why does that happen? And then the third bucket, not only on the cost of delivery side, but that third bucket, Opex, is something where I so rarely see entrepreneurs really seriously forecast this, have a goal for it, and then try to meet or beat that goal. So like, okay, let's say you're scaling from $2 million to $5 million in revenue, or let's say 2 to 10 million, 2 million to 10 million in revenue. And that's your, let's say like monthly pace. Okay. So you go from a pace where you're 2 million, what is that, over 12 months? Well, let's call it 2.4 million. So we'll say $200,000 a month. Okay. So you go from a $200,000 a month pace, we'll say from 2.4 million to 12 million. So you go from a $200,000 a month pace to $1 million a month pace, okay? Straight lined, we'll just say this business has exactly the same revenue every month for the sake of ease. Rarely do I see entrepreneurs, when they think about that change, they project the ad spend, they project the revenue, they project the COGS maybe even, but what they don't do is project the Opex on that next stage. They don't think about, okay, am I going to want to add an email agency? Am I going to have more software fees with Shopify or with Klaviyo or whatever? Am I going to have, some people are using these attribution tools that scale with spend, and it ends up costing you, it ends up being $1,000 a month or whatever tool. I don't know how much they cost because I don't use them, but those kinds of things all go in there. And especially with personnel and with agencies and those kinds of things, what I would recommend that you do is say, okay, if I'm going to get to that spend level, I see these 5 areas of the business that could get better. And every founder, every entrepreneur knows what this is like. You see all the holes in the business. You're doing too many things yourself. You want to outsource some work. You want to bring on a person over here, a person over there. Like, whatever those areas that you see are, plan ahead of time and budget yourself. Here's how much money I will allow myself to spend as I go, as my business grows. And if I can't keep my Opex under my budgeted number now, if I can't do that, then you know what? I'm not hiring more. I'm going to do more with less. I'm going to keep my business lean because that's a place in my business that I'm going to create profit. And so forecasting the business basically builds in a plan for how you will design each section of your P&L to create profitability as you scale, assuming profitability is what you are trying to create. But hey, even if you aren't trying to create profitability, having some target as you scale being this key idea. And so this is the thing that I see so many people get wrong and struggle with. And this happens with bigger businesses too. They don't project their Opex, and so they end up adding way too many costs because they're like, wait a minute, email's broken and our ads could use a little more creative and we need a new office space and whatever all of these things are, they end up not thinking about them. And because of that, those costs get out of hand and then they lose profitability. Or even more broadly, they simply don't really know where profit will get produced, and they aren't thinking very much about having a goal for each of those sections of the business. Okay. So they just don't think about the idea that, wait a minute, if my revenue goes up that much, I should call my supplier and see if I can get, 1% reduction in costs, or 1 point of margin back in my costs, or, think about renegotiating with my 3PL to do those things. Or again, like I said, all these elements of Opex that end up creating additional efficiencies in your P&L. They're not thinking about those things. And the reason why is you're not actually forecasting your P&L to have those 4 different buckets and then seeing how you do against that. The interesting thing is almost everybody does this with ad spend, right? If I was working with you today and you wanted to know how good of a job I was going to do, right? The way we would have that conversation would be, you would say, okay, Andrew, I need you to hit a 2-to-1 ROAS at $100,000 in spend. That's just simple numbers. Some number like that. You'd say, if you hit that, you're doing a great job. That's my goal. And then we would review, okay? $100,000 in spend, what was our ROAS? Or 150 in spend, what was our ROAS? Versus 50 in spend, and we would have that conversation. We would have a target, we would hit it, or not hit it, and we would review what happened, why did it go wrong, what do we need to change, do you need to fire me, whatever it is, right? But we don't do that with these other parts of our business. We don't give ourselves a target and then give ourselves a solution. Forecast your business, use the Lightspeed model, use Dave's information, forecast the business, and go from there. And you will have so much more clarity in the end about whether or not you are on the right path. You will keep costs under control. And as an operator, those are the kinds of things that are right in the center of your job description. Keep those things straight, know where profit is going to come from, manage to that profitability, and you'll be in really good shape. Okay, it's one of those episodes where I really don't know if it was so obvious to everybody else, and you're just going like, of course we all already do this. If so, please tell me. I would love to hear that. You can email me at podcast@ajfgrowth.com, DM me at Andrew J. Ferris on Twitter. I would love to hear from you about those things, and all of the usual other stuff applies. Subscribe. You can watch me on YouTube now if you didn't know that. Subscribe wherever you're listening to podcasts, rate, review, and if there's an operator who would get help from this, please share this with them. That would really help me and hopefully help them as well. I am pumped about next week's episode. I honestly think one of the best 5 episodes I have ever recorded. It is with Jack Rubin, co-founder, co-CEO of Purdy and Fig, a subscription-based house cleaning brand that is in the UK. I actually coach Jack and work with him closely and carefully on his business. He is a killer operator and provided an insane amount of insight and generosity about what is going on with his business. Like, I just really want you to listen to this episode. So listen next week to my episode with Jack. You will get a ton of value out of it. Subscribe to this show if you've not done so already. And don't forget to go visit my friends at More Staffing. You are forecasting your P&L and you're like, hey, I'm going to need to add talent. And if you are doing that, like, don't be a dummy. Go consider working with people in the Philippines who are incredible e-commerce professionals, and my friends at More Staffing can help you do that. Go to morenow.co to go do that. One last thing. Somebody DM'd me recently and said, I'm so glad your show's on YouTube now. Thank you for that. But here's the thing. You are really distracting because you move around too much when you talk. Please stop doing that. Everything else is great, but please stop doing that. I was so helped by that. So if you have comments like that for me, anything at all related to the content of this show, I want to hear from you. I'm not precious about it. I'm well aware that I'm a professional podcaster and that I could be better. So if there's ways in which I could be better, email me, DM me, all the usual stuff, and just yell at me. Just tell me how much I suck at something, and I would love to hear from you. So that's all. I will see you next time. My interview with Jack, coming soon. Thanks so much.